being here. It's our first event of shaming and praising campaign. More welcome. My name is Alireza. I'm a strategic consultant for UANI on European policies, and I'll just introduce the event. We aim to have an open hearing on Swedish companies who still have economic ties with the Islamic regime. And before just heading to the heart of the matter, I will let Honorable Parliament, Mr. Akhondi, a few words, introduction words. Then we'll have a 20 minutes presentation from both Mr. Wallace and Mr. Akhondi around the foundation, background of this campaign, how we run it, and what outcome do we expect and what are next steps. And then we'll have a panel discussion with our distinct guests, going around different questions, wider view of the impact of this kind of campaigns. And then we'll answer your questions. We'll have enough time. Although Mr. Akhondi's reputation precedes him, I just have a few words to introduce him. He's a Swedish politician representing the Centre Party, serving as a member of parliament since 2018, and elected for Stockholm County's constituency. In the Riksdag, he holds position in the Labour Market Committee, the Civil Affairs Committee, and the Tax Committee. Mr. Akhondi, as you know, is a leading advocate for the Iranian people's fight for democracy and freedom, and he pioneered the IRGC terrorist campaign to classify IRGC as a terrorist organization in Europe.
Thank you, Manili, and thank you for being here. Welcome to the Swedish Parliament. And really welcome to the Swedish Parliament. I'm really grateful to have you here. As you know, the Islamic Republic has, during the past 44 years, did everything it can to take trust, basic human rights from the Iranian society. As you know, the Islamic Republic has been engaged in terrorist activities, not only in the Middle East, but also in the Swedish soil. In the beginning of 90, they killed Iranian Swedish citizen in the city of Västerås. We know that they have killed people in Germany, in France. They are responsible for the bombing in Argentina. They have done a lot of things during these years. During these 44 years, we have seen a lot of protest with a few years marginal. The biggest one, I think everyone remembers, 2009, when they killed Neville Hostorgan. I still have that picture in front of me. I cried a lot that day. It was really terrible. The good thing with every terrible event is that it helps the society grow and take new paths to make sure that they reach the ultimate goal, the freedom. 1 year ago, a young woman, she was She was 22. She had to dreams, she had hope. Her only crime was that she didn't wear the mandatory hijab. And they killed her. And that was the starting point for my engagement in the Iranian issue. As you know, I grew up here. I didn't have any contact with the Iranian diaspora for 30 years. And we saw a huge engagement from Western politicians, from different ideologies, the conservatives, the Greens, the lefties, right-wings. We saw a lot of demonstrations on our streets in different cities around the West. We saw Generation Z on the streets in Iran. They got shot in their eyes. 20,000 people were arrested. Many of them are still in jail, being tortured. Many of the prisoners are raped in Iranian prisons. And we had around 600 killings, something like that. The official numbers, who knows who the real, what the real number is. It has been a really tough year, a lot of new experiences. In the beginning, we saw a commitment from both Western governments, but also within the diaspora. But we know that the Islamic Republic is good at dividing people. This is their main strategy, to divide us. They had a new deal with Saudi Arabia, Egypt. It was a game changer from many perspectives, and made our efforts with our campaigns much more difficult. But every problem has a solution, and we are today here to discuss the solutions, not the problems, because I think that everyone knows that the Islamic Republic is going to their rightful place, is the dustbin of history. The question is when, and with all our common efforts, I think that time will come quite soon. I want to introduce Ambassador Mark Wallace. I didn't know the ambassador before this. I apologize. I have learned that Ambassador Wallace has been one of the strongest advocates for freedom in Iran. He has been doing this for 25 years. 25 years of hard work and commitment. And he, Ambassador, served as a priority of senior U.S. governmental position during the administration of President George W. Bush, including as a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations for Management and Reform. He has been a leading voice to threat the Islamic Republic poses to the international community and the Iranian people. I'm really grateful to have Ambassador Mark Wallace here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alireza, Benelli, Mariam, Kasra, and the distinguished guests. It's an honor to be here. I've had the privilege of working in many countries in the context of Iran and counterterrorism, which is another area of my work. And I've never been to Sweden, and I've always wanted to come here, and I've admired the country. And I'm always reminded when I come to a country that as an American, we have a responsibility to say what we believe, say it loud and clear and with the right way, so that we build bridges and that we establish alliances rather than breaking them. I will say that the importance of Sweden in this issue is very high. I will also say that over 10 years ago was the first time I would send detailed letters begging Swedish businesses to end their ties to Iran. I don't want to single out a single company, right? That's not my purpose, and I don't mean to pick on Volvo, but I have photos of Volvo trucks carrying IRGC missiles. And I said that must stop. But I'm here in Sweden now with incredible people, with Iranians. And why is that important? Because so much has changed since I've been doing what I've been doing. And I get to work with Kasra. I get to work with Alireza. I get to work with Maneli, Mariam, and others, brave Iranians who are now facing the regime that is threatening them every day. So much has changed in the course of that time. Right now we have a war in Europe where we've all woken up to the danger of Vladimir Putin, the neutral Sweden, whatever your politicians think one way or the other about the ascent of NATO, but the neutral Sweden is confronting the danger of Vladimir Putin. So much has changed as I sit here today. But has it changed on Iran? I would say no. And it's so much harder for my brave Iranian friends that you're going to hear from. And every Swedish citizen, every Swedish lawmaker, every Swedish person that comes to visit should know that there are Iranian operatives out there that want to kill him. They want to kill her. She's not Swedish, but she's French. They'll find her in France. They want to kill my friend Kazan Arabi because he's an advocate for his people. How is it possible that to this day, the important industrial powerhouse that is Sweden continues to trade with Iran, while at the same time it is so desperate to avoid the dangers of Vladimir Putin that it's joining NATO, changing its relationship with Russia? Well, let me break some news to you. The partner to Vladimir Putin, the instrumentality of his weapons and his warfare, is the Iranian regime. It is Iranian drones that are killing Europeans in Ukraine. I don't want to sound as a Armageddon type person because it's wrong, but certainly Iranian drones flown from Russia could come to Sweden. And I don't understand how responsible Sweden, I serve with great Swedish diplomats. This is a place that is always the moral conscience, the moral voice of Europe. When I was ambassador at the UN, I would be lectured by my Nordic colleagues all the time. And I loved them because they would lecture me, and they were right. And they had the moral authority to do it. But how can Sweden right now take the stance it's taking against Russia without standing with the Iranian people, without standing with Swedish people that are the target of Iranian assassination, while Swedish executives are very comfortable trading with the IRGC? That is untenable. It is the responsibility of every Swede, the responsibility of every Swedish lawmaker to make sure that he is not assassinated by its trade partner, Iran. I've been calling for this for over a decade. The time for Swedish business as usual in Iran must stop now. It is wrong. The moment, God forbid, something happens to a Swedish Iranian simply for touting freedom for the people in Sweden, in Iran, the blood will be on the hands of every Swedish business executive that continues to do business as usual. How is it we've learned the lesson of Russia, but we haven't learned the lesson of Iran? It's wrong, it's untenable, and you must do more. This is Alireza, and I were discussing, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, but I'm sorry, I get worked up. I've been doing this too long, clearly I need a vacation. Every Swedish company, he pointed out to me, should be forced to disclose the nature and extent of its Iranian business. If you're a major company and you're doing business in Iran, let me tell you, if you're a big Swedish company like a Scania, and you're doing business inside of Iran, you're doing business with the IRGC, a brutal terrorist organization. You're going to hear later this morning from, in my opinion, the world-leading expert on the IRGC, my friend Kasra Arabi. How is it that a Swedish company can be doing business of any scale in Iran without disclosing that to the Swedish people, while those same Iranian partners are working the streets of Sweden trying to kill my friends here. Swedish businesses must come clean about their Iran business. You want to know why? The moment they're forced to truly be transparent to the Swedish people or to the European people about their business in Iran is the very first day that they start planning their exit, because they cannot stand the spotlight and criticism of working in a country that puts women's eyes out, that gasses school children, and kills the likes of Massa Amini. We must do more about this. And Swedish businesses are a place to start. Sweden is uniquely situated. I visit a lot of countries, but Sweden is uniquely situated given what Sweden is, its history, its legacy, its proximity in dealings with Russia. Sweden must take the lead, must be transparent, and must cut off its business dealings with Iran if it wants to have any moral high ground, considering what's happening in Russia. I'm sorry for being so worked up and fiery about this, but I was looking in my preparation for this work. I was looking at the correspondence that I wrote with Swedish executives over 10 years ago. And so much has changed since that time. But has it changed in the context of Iran? No, except they're trying to kill one of your parliamentarians. Any Swedish newspaper that's covering this should understand that a trade partner of Sweden is trying to kill one of your parliamentarians because he has the audacity of being born in Tehran and speaking against the Ayatollah. That's wrong. I look forward to talking to you more about this in the presentation.
Thank you, Ambassador Wallace, for your passion and your knowledge. In September, when I started with my engagement at work, UANI issue, I compared the Islamic Republic with a tree who has deep roots, roots that has been growing for 44 years. I said that the best method to make sure that we can remove this rotten tree is weaken the roots. And this is the background of this campaign. We are calling it shaming and praising, and a dear child has many different names. We can call it whatever we want. The goal is to encourage social responsibility. The goal is to make sure that a global company, Volvo, Scania, and Sweden has a lot of local companies, make them take their parts of their responsibility for things that are happening around the world. Many people have asked me if the Iran engagement is only about Iran. My answer is no. This is a security issue for Sweden. We know that Swedish Secret Service points out Iran as one of the most active spy organizations several years in a row publicly, because Iran is really active in Sweden. They are doing migrant espionage, industrial espionage. They are committing other illegal things in Sweden. We know that IABC are present in Ukraine. We know that Iran is supplying the Russian arms with both drones, but also ammunition. And Ukraine, we did a historic thing in Sweden. We decided to go in NATO. It's a huge step. If you look at the Swedish history, we have been neutral for 200 years. So it was a big thing for us. The shaming part is not to point out companies. The shaming part is practically about bringing up the topic of how important it is for the companies to take responsibility. We want to praise the companies. We don't want to shame them. But if they don't take their part of the responsibility, what is our options? Then let the world know that these companies actively decided that they don't want to stand on the right side of history. In the theory of this campaign is both simple and complex at the same time. Ambassador Wallace has been sending notifications to these companies for many years. We did that once more. We wrote long letters with questions, asked the companies about, give them the opportunity to come with clarification. Are you engaged in Iran or not? And we described the background, asked them to take their part of the responsibility. As you know, this is the summary, as you see on the board, that we know for fact that 11 Swedish companies are actively engaged in Iran. We suspect strongly that 18 more companies are engaged in somehow inside Iran, but we are reviewing their engagement, the level of engagement, and after these letters we have confirmation, written confirmation from 5 of these companies that they have withdrawn from the Iranian market. And we have also thanked this company, and we want to praise this company who take their part of the responsibility. We try to categorize these companies in the different level there because the impact of the company's level of engagement inside Iran is different. The level A companies are the big ones that make the most impact within the regime, within the Iranian society. Their engagement are so big that we need to push them a little bit harder. The category B company, let's take a few examples. At category A, SKF, one of the Swedish main companies, Scania, Zetland, Tapflo, Volvo Trucks, Ericsson, Chris Marine. This is high-level industrial companies. Of these 46 companies that we have contacted, only 7 responded. Every one of them was invited to this event. No one has shown up. We are not surprised. This is a conclusion that we need to put more pressure on these companies. This is not the end station of our effort. This is just the beginning of our effort to make them stop dealing with the Islamic Republic and indirectly contributing to the IAGC global terrorism around the world.
May I ask? It's a shocking list because these were some of the leading companies in Sweden. And we live in an era of corporate social responsibility and in socially conscious investing. And I sit in this chair in really a place that's viewed as, in a lot of ways, the conscience of Europe. How is it that we don't know the nature and extent of the business of these incredible Swedish companies with the IRGC? Notice I didn't say Iran. I said the IRGC, the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. It must be, and Alireza made this point at dinner last night, if these companies will not openly share the nature and extent of their business in Iran, they should be compelled to do so. because they're Swedish government contracts, the Swedish people using their products. We don't want to harm any great Swedish company, just like I don't want to harm any great American company. But damn it, we should know if these companies are doing business with a terrorist group. And if they won't voluntarily do it because they don't want to tell the truth, it's up to Swedish lawmakers to make them tell the truth. And the Swedish people to hold them account, because the Swedish people are better than that.
And I was really disappointed because if you remember the Leave Russia campaign that was worldly engaging people, the difference between that campaign and this campaign is that in the Russian case, a lot of information was public. It was quite easy to follow the tracks. As parliamentarian here, I have one tool to get deep information, and this is the Parliament investigation organ here. I sent them an email and asked them about this. They didn't want to respond. They said that this information is classified. So it was really shocking that I, as a parliamentarian, cannot know simple public information that we need to search in other channels. I was really disappointed.
In the United States, we had a similar reaction 15 years ago. It used to be companies were not obligated to disclose their business in Iran. Now the SEC mandates and requires disclosure. And it's not just for the reasons that I care about. It's because the investors, the employees, the workers of these companies have a right to know and to live not in fear of working with the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world. It is unconscionable and obviously very obvious why the information isn't available publicly on these companies. They don't want you to know. The reason they don't want you to know is they can't handle the scrutiny once it's apparent that they are doing business in Iran. The moment a Swedish executive at Scania comes into this room, sits in front of a bunch of lawmakers and Swedish people and says, oh, by the way, we do a lot of work in Iran with the IRGC, it's good business. That is not Swedish. That is not human. That is not humane.
These companies are, for us in this stage, proven working inside Iran and indirectly contributing to IRGC-led global terrorism. As a Swedish lawmaker, member elected by the people, I'm ashamed to see leading Swedish companies in this context. And my signal is clear. You have the possibilities now to withdraw from Iran, take your part of the social global responsibility. This is just the starting point, not the end station. We are going to reach out to these companies one by one. If necessary, we are taking legal measures against these companies, and we are making them understand that business as usual doesn't exist anymore.
Alireza, leave that slide up. You are a Swedish leader, and there are other Swedish leaders in this room. These aren't just Swedish companies. These are important international, global companies that happen to be Swedish. And last time I checked, Sweden was the place that held things to account. Swedes care. The Swedish government cares. It matters. How is it that that list is a list of companies that are doing business or have done business in Iran that have been very open about doing it? It must stop and change. If it can't stop and change in Sweden, it can't change anywhere.
I don't know, for those who follows Iranian media, this was a heartbreaking scene few weeks ago, 1 week ago. Cristiano Ronaldo visited Iran with his Saudi-based companies, and the Scania logo on that bus and the comments how proud they were to taking Cristiano Ronaldo around. I was really sad to see it, not because that Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't want to take his part of the responsibility. I was ashamed as a member of the Swedish parliament that the Swedish company Scania want to have their logo in that context. It was really shameful. We have this short video, I think, from that event. Let's see if I find it. Let's see if I will make it bigger. The technology is not my strongest. But I have news for the Scania chairman. They have billboards on the way to their factories. Let's send a message to them on those billboards. Every time the workers are driving to the factory, let's them meet a message from the Iranian people inside Iran that you are contributing to the torture of the prisoners, contributing to raping of prisoners inside the Iranian jails. You are contributing and crushing every ideal who built this country to what it is today.
Alireza, the point that we have to make here too is, I'm not a bus expert. That's obviously, in my mind, looks like a shiny new Scania bus. And I bet it costs a lot of money because Scania makes those buses look pretty nice. You can't sell something of that value or consequence inside of Iran without involving the IRGC. Scania is trading with the IRGC, who its forces are trying to kill multiple people that are in this room with me today, that are brutalizing their own people, that have resulted in the death and imprisonment of tens of thousands of people in Iran, and all because the Swedish company wants to have its bus in Iran. That's disgraceful. And Scania needs to understand what it means to do that business in Iran. You don't sell that bus in Iran without selling it to the IRGC. And Kasra and others will discuss that with you.
This is a list of companies that we strongly suspect are engaged within the Iranian market. And we are investigating them. And this is a company who has been receiving letters from UANI, Ambassador Wallace and me. And we still want their responses to make sure that they know what they are doing. This is companies who I want to praise, companies who actively wanted to leave the Iranian market. And for that, I want to send a big thanks to these companies. This is big companies, as you know. This is not with companies who actively say that they don't want to be part of financing global terrorism.
Look, when we discussed this many months ago with Alireza, I remember him telling to me, and I remember thinking, wow, I said something like that before. This is not about being against Swedish business. This is not about being against Swedish industrial capacity or employees or labor unions. We, and Alireza, want those companies to thrive. In fact, their involvement in work in Iran jeopardizes the integrity of those companies, the investor relations of those companies, the labor unions that are associated with it. Let's be clear, the labor unions that work with Scania are working to support a company that has business in Iran where they killed labor union organizers. There's no such thing as a labor movement inside of Iran. How does that work? This is not about being against Swedish business. This is about having Swedish business be on the right side of history and doing the right thing in the most basic corporate social responsibility.
And to be clear, I love Swedish companies. Private companies are, from my liberal perspective, the backbone of a society. But as a lawmaker, as a parliamentarian, the social responsibility part is equally important. And we want to send a clear signal if you choose to do this investment. We understand that we draws from market cost money. Totally understand it. But we want to give them the opportunity to be a great partner in the future free Iran. And they can, in a free society, make 100 times more money and be positive for the Swedish economy. Swedish economy is an open economy. 50% of our GDP is coming from trades. We need trades, but we need responsible trades. Now, I want to ask Mr. Kasra Arabi to join us. Thank you, Ambassador Wallace.
Casual, please do a better job talking about the IRGC as I was trying to do. Casual, please decisions.
Let me start with introducing Kasra. I didn't know Kasra either. During this year, I didn't know Kasra either. Sorry that I didn't know that from. I have learned a lot of new faces during this year. But I'm really grateful how elegant and how intelligent you presenting fact. And I'm a fact-based person. I don't like to guess, because guessing is not solving any problem. And little bit of introduction. Kasra serves as a director at United Against Nuclear Iran, UANI. Previously, he led the Iran program at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Kasra is working toward his PhD at the University of St. Andrew, focusing on IRGC. I'm really grateful, Kasra, that you have taken the time to come here and give your perspective on this and the effect of your speciality, IRGC. The floor is yours.
How do you turn this on, Alireza? How do you turn this on? There we go. I'm not a tech expert. Well, thank you for having me. This is a really important topic, and it comes at a critical time as well, because some may be aware, some may not, but the Islamic Republic has started a new and brutal wave of suppression inside Iran. This began a few months before the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's murder, targeting the families of those who had their loved ones killed, targeting Iranian youth more fiercely, and also going after individuals who have voiced support for the Iranian people. That's inside of Iran, whether that's people working in the creative arts, whether that's celebrities, etc. At the same time, we have seen that global policy has not acknowledged the new and brutal wave of suppression in Iran. And we saw the transfer of $6 billion to the Islamic Republic. We saw the Raisi administration being welcomed at New York. And this has built an overinflated sense of confidence in Tehran by the regime, where they fear no consequences. And we see that on US soil. They were harassing and assaulting journalists, which is completely outrageous and unacceptable. And before I go into the actual topic today, it's important to understand that the Islamic Republic rests on two pillars: the pillar of suppression, whether that's suppression or terrorism inside of Iran or outside, and the pillar of propaganda, tabligat, as we say in Farsi. Now, underpinning these two pillars is an economic resource. Now, a lot of that is part of the black economy that the Islamic Republic has created, but also trying to work and facilitate trade illicitly and sometimes legally with companies. And Western companies have rightfully taken a stance against Vladimir Putin and Russia, making it absolutely clear that they will not tolerate no business as usual. And they must be praised for that. However, at the same time, they've not severed ties with the Islamic Republic, the single greatest state sponsor of terrorism and the biggest military supporter of Putin's war in Ukraine. Just a few weeks ago, or maybe it was even last week, we saw that the defense minister of Russia, of Putin's regime, was welcomed upon the invitation of IRGC commanders, was taken to an IRGC aerospace exhibition to showcase the latest missiles and drones. This is in the build-up to the expiry of the UN ban on missiles and transfer, which is going to be in a few weeks' time. We're currently seeing Iranian-made drones, IRGC drones, being fired into Europe. And we should all be concerned. I think Sweden, we're talking about Sweden today, and I can talk about other countries, not least the United Kingdom, but as is Sweden, I think the Swedish companies have a responsibility. They've taken, the accession to NATO is a huge moment. They've taken a firm stance against Putin's Russia. They shouldn't undermine that by doing business with his greatest ally. And I'll leave it there for your Q&A that's going to be more specific about the session today.
Thank you, Kasa. I have a few questions to you. A couple of days ago, we saw an article in The Guardian about 52 parts in the drones that are manufactured by European companies who are attacking civilians in Ukraine. What is your thoughts about that?
Yeah, this is really important, and we worked in the UK on this story, exposing university cooperation with the Islamic Republic, with universities in Iran. Let's make it absolutely clear, universities in Iran are not independent. The heads of all universities are appointed by the Supreme Council of the Cultural Revolution, a Khamenei-controlled entity, the highest authority for education and cultural affairs. An entity that's directly controlled by Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, very recently, in 2021, the Supreme Council of Cultural Revolution published a strategic document in accordance and in alignment with the military forces, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran. In that document, senior military intelligence and IRGC commanders who was part of this document, they were signatories to this document, this document was published, and we exposed this document, it states openly that since 2021, the IRGC and other armed elements of the regime are able to make, quote, maximum use of all national academic, private and research capabilities to acquire, quote, soft, semi-soft and hard defence and security sciences and technologies. We've also seen that this document lays bare that the IRGC will have maximum access to these universities to procure these military technologies. And not only that, this document, I'm going to read this part of it, to add insult to injury, the strategy states that one of the objectives is hostility with enemies in the path of achieving scientific defence goals of the Islamic Republic. So procuring these technologies and research from universities in the West through partnerships and using them against the West. And we're seeing that in Ukraine today. We're seeing that UAVs, Iranian drones, were made using components, European technology, and through corporations with Western academic institutions. That's completely unacceptable. And I saw there were universities on this. Now, this document lays it absolutely clear. If you are a university in Europe, and you may say, and this is the old, we've heard this in the UK, oh, we do our due diligence measures. Well, let me push back on that. This document, which is published by the highest authority in the regime, signed by Hossein Salami, IRGC Commander-in-Chief, states that all Iranian universities are required by law to hand over all the partnerships that they have and make these means available to the IRGC and other armed elements of the regime. So there is no doubt that if a European university is engaging with an Iranian university, that the information, the research, the technologies that they are sharing and cooperating on, that will end up in the hands of the IRGC, period. This document lays that bare. So I think that's an absolutely critical part of this, because this isn't an issue. It used to be Iran was an issue very far away. This is now on our borders. It's in European soil. And we're also seeing the nefarious activities taking place in Sweden, in the UK. So, and this is a really important issue. As well as that, very quickly, the single most important document in the Islamic Republic right now to be able to identify its trajectory is the second phase of the Islamic Revolution document, a manifesto published by Khamenei, which is his vision for the next 40 years of the Islamic Republic. This document makes it absolutely clear that the regime must use the private sector in Iran to achieve its goals, not least to circumvent sanctions. I think that's something that we should keep in mind here. There is no such thing as an independent private sector in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Even in Farsi, you have private sector is Bakhsh Khususi. We have Bakhsh Khusudolati, private state-run, private state-run private sector. So that's worth keeping in mind. There is no independent private sector in the Islamic Republic.
So what you're saying, that Linné University in Sweden, who has a memorandum of understanding with one university, that they are giving Swedish technology and knowledge to IRGC. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying this, the strategic document saying this. It's published. It's signed by the highest authority. It's signed by Cleric Khosrowpana, Khamenei's appointee, an IRGC affiliated cleric. One of the individuals who is in Moshtaba Khamenei's circle. I'm not saying it, they're saying it. But on the other hand, Western academic institutions are looking the other way. At the same time, when the Iranian youth inside Iran, Iranian students inside the country, are on the front lines, both men and women, countering the Islamic Republic, getting suppressed in their university dormitories. And Western academic institutions still are cooperating and not only cooperating on a kind of handshaking level, but sharing research, which, as I said, as per this document, we can say with absolute certainty, 100% certainty, any research that is being transferred or if there is any cooperation with an Iranian university, as per this document, it's not my words, will be in the hands of not just the IRGC, but the Ministry of Intelligence, the National Security Council, etc. So the suppressive apparatus of the Islamic Republic.
I have one question for you. Before that, I think that I need to write a letter to the principal of the new university today, ask for a meeting.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good way to make him understand that his decision has implications on other places. So please stay. I want to invite two of my fellow members of parliament, and Mr. Håkan Svenneling and Mr. Alireza. This is two voices who have been really engaged, asked questions from Tobias Wikström and others, and did everything they can to show their support for the brave Iranian people. Mr. Alireza, please sit here. Welcome. Thank you for being here. You have heard the presentation. What is your initial thoughts about that, Mr. Svenneling?
Thank you so much for the invitation here and to have you back in the Swedish Parliament. We felt a really strong support here in the Parliament from the Iranian people when we lifted Iran on the agenda, as we've done, especially during the last year, but also for many years before that. I want to try to answer a little bit of Ambassador Makboulas' question about how Sweden can be this moral high ground when he was in the UN, and how we now are having companies on the shame list. And I would say that maybe one part of it is because of the Swedish trade delegation that was to Iran in February 2017. The Prime Minister led the delegation. The second leader of the delegation was the Minister for Trade. She later became the Foreign Minister after that, until the last election. And what's happening during that delegation was that it was one of the biggest trade delegations that Sweden was having during that time. More than 50 people was included in the delegation. After critique, the union were able to join the delegation. But during that trip, lots of agreement was signed for this company that now are on the shame list. A lot of documents also were signed by governmental officials, especially the trade ministers, but also other ministers, that Sweden and Iran should cooperate, and that led to academia also signing those agreements. So I want to point out that even though it's companies and universities that we now have on the shame list, this comes from a political level, when the thought was that you can have more trade with the regime, and therefore you can talk about human rights. I didn't then at that point didn't think that was the right way to go. I criticized this, and we who criticized it then today see that we are right. You can't handle the regime in a way that you think that if you are nice to them, that they will be nice to you and to other people. I think this is a really good campaign. I think it's really important to stress the idea of the link between Iran and Russia. My next meeting I'm going to is about Ukraine. Meeting after that is about Russia and the situation in Russia. And I think that if we have this concept of linking Iran and Russia together, I think we will see even more sanctions and even less cutting deals with Iran in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Svenneling. Mr. Alireza, what is your initial thoughts?
Thank you so much. I would like to agree with what Håkan, my colleague from the Left Party, said. And of course, I also agree with many of the views that have been pointed out here earlier. And of course, it is awful to see how companies put their interests before human rights, not only in Iran, but also in other countries, especially in Iran right now. I think that if I can continue with what Håkan just said, we need to have a discussion about how the trade and the financial policies in different countries in the West are somehow legitimizing the dictatorships in different countries. When we're talking about Saudi Arabia, for example, earlier, or a few years ago, then many of the politicians said that we need to have trade with them because that's the way we create democracy in different countries. When we were talking about China, it was the same, about Russia, it was the same, and also Iran was the same. And of course, it comes to a point when they can't continue with that argument, and I think Iran is one of those examples where they can't continue with saying that trade is going to bring democracy. But we need to have a larger perspective in the future also, that you can't force democracy into a dictatorship with trade agreements. That's not the way to handle it. Mention one country in the world, in the history of the world, that have been democratic, that has been more democratic or leaving dictatorship behind it because of the trade. I don't know any example of that. So it is both about these companies taking advantage of the loopholes that are within the systems, but it's also about, like Håkan said, the political decisions that have been made in the parliaments that put trade and money before human rights. So I think it's both perspectives that we need to have. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question for all three. These kind of campaigns, quite uncharted territory. We have few examples. Burma, Myanmar, similar campaign. We see on the Russian campaign. What is your objective about the result? Can this be a good method or not? What do you see from your different horizons?
I think absolutely we can see both historical example, but also today example of how it can have an impact on regimes and what's happening. I think from a more historic perspective, I think South Africa is the good example, that where companies and the connection to companies was one of the key functions that made South Africa stop with their apartheid system. I think France and the winery, when they wanted to have nuclear testing in the 90s, was something that sparked my political interest when I was a young boy. And we see today that companies leaving Russia in a very high speed, and those companies who doesn't, I often get questions from journalists and comment on what they should do. I mean, sometimes it's not always easy. They have contracts, they have signed the contracts when they thought that that was a good idea. But when you put them on a list like this and show them the alternative, they also have a chance to show us the right way to do. And that's what we now need, is to cut the economic ties to the regime.
Thank you, Kasper.
Yes, it's really important, is the short answer. Just to take a step back, you mentioned, and I'm glad you opposed the decision, the idea that you could lead to change through trade and moderation. When it comes to the Islamic Republic, we have to understand that the Islamic Republic is a totalitarian regime, similar to that of what was the Soviet Union. And what we often hear about the deep state, which is the IRGC, but what the IRGC has created and what the suppressive machinery has created is a deep society, Jameh Amin, in Farsi. This deep society has a working class, middle class, and upper class, but it is a small percentage of the population, and to do any business in Iran, this deep society is connected to the suppressive IRGC apparatus, and to do business in Iran, you have to have connections with this deep society, otherwise, well, you won't have business to undertake. So, what may appear to many Swedish companies, and why would they know this? They would say, oh, it's a private sector company. If that private sector company, and you're talking about we saw some big names up there, they're global companies. They're global companies based in Sweden, but they're international. They are covering major industries. Well, guess what? Major industry in Iran is controlled and securitized by the regime, by the IRGC. So that's the point there. And that's why, by the way, in 2015, when you had the nuclear agreement, and I was in Tehran in 2017, you heard, and this was before the reimposition of sanctions, everyone saying there's been no trickle-down effect. Where's the money gone? Well, the money serves, there's no trickle-down effect to the ordinary Iranian because the money serves the deep economy, the deep society. It enriches the regime further. The regime is a totalitarian regime. The choice is, it has its ideological objectives and it's going to pursue them with or without economic support. The choice is, if you do trade, it will have access to more resources. And that's, so to bring it back to your point, campaigns like this are extremely important because, well, the most important step are sanctions. Sanctions is the most effective way to curb this kind of activity. But you've got sanctions, but you've actually got the more important issue is the enforcement of sanctions. And we know that Western powers have taken a more relaxed approach to the enforcement of sanctions. The Islamic Republic is now exporting around 2 million barrels of oil per day, close to levels, pre-sanction levels. So if Western governments aren't willing to enforce their own sanctions, there needs to be pressure for sanctions enforcement. And I think activities like these, campaigns like this, can be that push. And we've seen this, it's fantastic. I'm very, very proud to say UANI has done some amazing work on tracking shadow tankers, carrying illicit Iranian oil. And that's led to action. So campaigns like this are critical. We've seen the effect it's had against Putin's Russia. We need to duplicate that to hit Khamenei's regime in Iran.
Thank you, Kasa. It was 1 or 2 weeks ago that UANI tracked a tanker with 980,000 barrels of stolen oil was seized in Persian Gulf. This is the result when people collaborate, and put the right pressure on the barbaric regime. Mr. Alireza, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. I think we need to get rid of the hypocrisy that we have seen for many years. As you mentioned, Russia, I think it was last week, they told about a huge tanker with gas coming from Russia to Sweden, and it's actually pretty rare that it comes directly to Sweden, but it did now, despite all the words about having sanctions against the Russian regime and so. I believe that's important. These kind of campaigns are always important when you want to put pressure on or fight against the dictatorship. As Håkan said, we had South Africa as an example, but there are also other countries and even also Western countries that have been, under the boycott campaigns because of wars or stuff like that in different parts of the world. What I believe is that we need to have our focus on putting the pressure on the regime and the IRGC in this matter, because for many years the sanctions have mainly been, I would say, against the people in Iran. When people are suffering from many of the sanctions that have been for many years. It's not the children or the relatives of the regime men who are suffering from not having medicine or food or money or stuff like that, because they have all of that. But many of the people have been suffering because of, not only because of the sanctions, but because of the maybe sometimes wrong sanctions. So we need to talk about how we can sanction them, how we can stop these companies, so that we can have an effect on putting pressure on the regime and to fight against the regime, not to fight against the people while we say that we're going to fight against the regime, So when it comes to some kind of, food, when it comes to things that people need, the export and import from. That's really, I mean, I think it's a difficult discussion, because you can't just say that we're going to stop all the export and import from a country, even if it is a dictatorship, because it's the people that are going to starve if that's the case. So we need to talk about how we can do this so that, like we have done, I mean, listing all the companies that are having that has trade with Iran. I remember when I was in I'm still a member of the Committee on EU Affairs in the Swedish Parliament, and I remember that the former foreign minister, she presented a list of U.S. companies still having trade with Iran, and they had also, I mean, permission to do that from the government. That they were not, how do you say, they had some kind of dispense when it came to having trade with Iran. And I mean, we need to stop all those kind of companies and those kind of rules. So, yeah, the focus should be to go against the government, not the people.
To follow up the remarks that Mr. Riyazat is giving, I have a difficult question. This is something that doesn't have an easy answer, but I want to hear your reflection about it. As we know, 28 million of Iranians are living under the poverty line. Iran is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world. And the objective that we can have when we have these kind of campaigns is similar to what you are discussing, that regular people are the ones that are suffering, not the regime. I don't agree with you in that part, but I want to raise this issue because I know that everyone in this panel strive for freedom, and this is a complex issue. Short remarks about this.
Yeah, I mean, if we have the recipe for changing the regime, I think we should have done it already, because it's been for 4 years since the regime took power. And that's the hard thing here in how to make a regime shift. What we've seen during the last year is that the people of Iran isn't accepting the regime and won't tolerate or be silent about it. The demonstration shows a lot of courage, a lot of bravery, of standing up and both not following laws and regulations, but also, of course, taking the streets and protests. What we need to do from the outside of Iran is to support those brave women and men who are doing that. And we can do it in a lot of ways, but we know that if we can target the regime and the regime's ways of both having actual weapons, technical products that they can use, but also like a visit of Cristiano Ronaldo that's are just for a show of letting people attract to other directions. So I think that we have a responsibility to act and to do whatever we can to stop the regime. And I was very disappointed with the former Swedish government on that sense, especially due to the trip in 2017. But we now see the new Swedish government shaking hands, smiling and being happy when they meet with Iranian officials. And I'm not happy about that. And I'm going to do my best as a parliamentarian to stop it.
Thank you, Mr. Selim. Mr. Arabi.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of nuance that needs to be covered here, because it sounds good when you say, of course, humanitarian goods should not be sanctioned. But first of all, that money or the aid is given is fungible. So the IRGC can use and employ that in reality any way it wants. Also, who controls the economy in Iran? The IRGC. There's no doubt about that. as I said, there's no independent private sector. Now, just as a particular case in point, when the Islamic Republic, on the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's murder, received $6 billion that was transferred, $6 billion ransom. First of all, it gave the Islamic Republic a propaganda and psychological warfare victory, which they exploited, and we saw how arrogant they were. They didn't hide that. They came to New York and harassed and attacked journalists. But also, it's important to understand that this regime, if you're claiming that we're doing business on humanitarian grounds and the Iranian regime can only use this for humanitarian purposes, this is the same regime that is killing Iranians on the streets, that is detaining, torturing the Iranian people. The regime in Iran, the Islamic Republic, doesn't care for the people of Iran. It wants to destroy the people of Iran. You're either an insider or an outsider. They don't distinguish between, oh, he's a fellow compatriot. No, they reject nationalism. They reject the concept of being Iranian. You're either a Khodi or Ghayr Khodi. On the same day that these funds were transferred, the family of Jawad Haydari, who was an Iranian protester, killed by this regime, the family, where they wanted to mourn the one-year anniversary of his murder, they were attacked, they were detained. So the idea that you can do humanitarian business, and that's what it is, let's call it that. It's not aid, it's business, humanitarian business with the Islamic Republic. Again, sounds good in theory, it sounds great. And you know, if we were dealing with a normal country, a normal regime, I would say absolutely. But we're dealing with a totalitarian regime who's killing Iranians every day and that is controlled by Ayatollah Khamenei, the Beit Rahbari, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So humanitarian business is still business with the IRGC.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with what Castro is saying, but I also think that, I mean, on a theoretical level, I agree with everything you said because this is the reality. The IRGC are controlling the economy.
That's theory and practice.
Yeah, also in practice. But what I mean is that in reality, people still need food, and people still need medicine, and people still need to live, have their life, you know. So we all know, and we are all against that the IRGC are controlling the system. But it's not as easy as saying that then the people of Iran don't have the right to anything from anywhere in the world.
No, the people of Iran, no, I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. I'm saying, if you're doing business with the Islamic Republic, you're not supporting the Iranian people, you're enriching their killers.
Yes, and I agree.
Who's creating the food crisis in Iran? Who's creating the water crisis in Iran? It's not Western governments, it's the Islamic Republic, it's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. To help the Iranian people, we need to support their aspirations, we need to provide them with the practical support, not just rhetoric. Look at the internet, for example, and I'm very proud again that UANI has launched Project Constellation. This is to provide, it's a means to provide Starlink satellite internet to the Iranian people. That's direct support to the Iranian people, that's directly supporting the people, drawing a distinction between the regime and the people. My point is that you can label it what you want, humanitarian, but it's still business because you're dealing with the regime. If there are ways that we can guarantee that the aid, food, whatever, reaches the hands of the Iranian people, of course, I'm all for it. But I'm not for enriching the Islamic Republic on the basis that it's humanitarian business. That's what we'll see.
Yeah, and I have never said that we were going to do that because I would never accept anything like that. And as long as the Iranian regime, this dictatorship are in power, then we know that those money are not going to the people, and we know that they're going to continue to steal and to be corrupt. corrupt and to bring money to other countries for their own good and for their families and so, and to steal from the people. That's the fact. And we also know that the upper class, a small group in the upper class in Iran are also supporting this because they are connected to the IRGC and they are maintaining this order. So I agree 100% on that matter. But what I mean is that when we do this kind of campaigns, it's also important to always have the people, because if you stop bringing food from other countries to Iran because of that we don't want to have trade with Iran, then it's not like the mullahs are going to stop to steal money from Iran. They're still gonna steal the money from the people, but then they both gonna steal and the people won't have any food. So that's an issue that is about the reality of the people of Iran. But then, of course, I agree. We need to put every economical and trade barriers to the government so that they can't make a penny from money from other countries to continue to oppress the people of Iran. Because that's how they have been oppressing the people in so many years. It's not like they are living their own life and doing everything by themselves. They get money from different countries and they have trade agreements with different countries. We need to stop these trade agreements, we need to stop these companies, but we need to do it with the people's best in mind and not only because we are against the regime, because we need to help the people and we need to be against the regime also. So,
If I can make a point of order.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to step up here. I've written thousands of letters to companies
Please come up.
around the world, and I have been involved in the drafting of legislation in the United States of America and around the world on sanctions. The debate is very well intended, but it reflects the misinformation campaign of the Islamic Republic. I do not believe that you want to repeat the talking points of the regime. But let me be clear. There is not a single sanction on the books anywhere in the free world that prohibits the delivery of foodstuffs or medicines into Iran. The narrative...
Sorry, I just want to say that's why I'm not against the sanctions.
I know. So the narrative, the utter bullshit that comes out of the regime that says medicine and foodstuffs aren't getting to children is the regime denying the necessities to its own people. These campaigns, the thousands of campaigns that the United Against Nuclear Iran has pursued over many years, there is not a single campaign that we ran against a foodstuff company or a medicine company. Not a single one.
I agree. Why I brought this up? Because I know that after this seminar,
They'll complain.
they will complain
And they'll demonize.
and they will demonize. That's why I strategically brought this topic up, because we have good answers. Every one of us in this panel, we are not targeting. Look at this company. Which of them are working with food or medicine? No one. The companies that UANI has been targeting for many years,
Thousands of companies. Thousands of companies.
they are not working with food and medicines. So the Islamic Republic, I know that you are afraid. Today you published 2 articles in the Iranian newspaper attacking us because you know how impactful this campaign is. And we need to send, because Iran International, Voice of America, 2 of the strongest Iranian news agencies are saying this, live streaming this. So for the Iranian people, we are not targeting you. We are targeting the Islamic Republic who are killing you and depriving you of basic human rights.
And just to add to that, I think the Iranian people know that well. The Iranian people know that well. When the ransom, and this isn't just the United States, the United Kingdom is also guilty of this, I'm very sad to say. They are saying, the Iranian people are saying that the frozen assets, that's the Iranian people's money. It's not the Islamic Republic which is occupying Iran, which hates Iran, which doesn't even recognize Iran as a nation state. It views the world through the Dar al-Islam and the Dar al-Kufr, like, by the way, other Islamist extremist entities, no different to the likes of ISIS, Al-Qaeda. I have unearthed and for the first time translated, analysed the IRGC's indoctrination material, and the textbooks say we do not regard nation states as a thing. That's a Westphalian concept. We divide the world between the Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Kufr, the land of Muslims, land of infidels. No different to the likes of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or Hezbollah, which the IRGC created. I think the Iranian people know this well, and what is part of the problem, and Mark touched upon this, is the mass disinformation campaign the regime has. This is one of them. This is one of them. And I think it's really important for us to be able to cut through that, because we can have these academic debates, but whilst we're having these academic debates, people in Iran, young people in Iran, are getting killed on the streets, are getting detained, are getting blinded. So we can talk about these academic debates for hours, but it doesn't take away from the reality. What the reality is, we need to constrain the Islamic Republic and stop its economic resources. And that's, by the way, it's not just a question of economy and human rights. This is a matter of Swedish national security. When the IRGC is conducting terror plots on Swedish soil, when the IRGC is also nurturing homegrown Islamist radicalization using tactics like ISIS Al-Qaeda through the networks of charities, centres, mosques that they've created. Yeah, this is a question of Swedish national security. I'm sure none of those Swedish companies would want to inflict harm on their citizens, on their workers. So this is a question of, first and foremost, I would say, national security, and it should be treated as such.
I'm really grateful for this discussion. I think it's really important discussions. I have one final question before we let the audience ask any question. A few years ago, when Qasem Soleimani was killed, rightfully killed, the Swedish security forces arrest a few Iranians on Swedish soil for doing terrorist complots against Ethiopia embassy. The plot was ongoing on the Swedish soil. We know, I was at a seminar on OPEC Treasury, US. They say that 4 of 5 barrels of oil is given to the Netherlands. And this is money who are stealing from the Iranian people, who are not going to buy food or medicine for the 28 million of people who are living under the poverty line. So don't buy the Islamic Republic propaganda. These companies that we are targeting is 2,500 companies that we, with help of UANI, has identified in different countries. And no one of them are in that sector. All of them are this kind of sector, academic sector, are the things that are providing the Islamic Republic with current currency and ways to go around sanctions. So your final remarks, what is your dreams in a positive, I want to end in a positive way. What is your dreams and hope about the Iranian society? Short remarks, Mr. Riyasat.
Thank you so much. I think that this campaign and with many other campaigns that are going on against the government in Iran, the regime in Iran, they will be successful in the end. We know that all the dictatorships in different parts of the world, they have an expiry date, and this government had an expiry date as well. With these kind of campaigns, I think that their expiry date will be shorter, and I'm glad for that. So I would like to thank you for doing this. I think this is an important part of the protests against the regime. And I think that it's also within the movements that are protesting against the regime. I think it's important to have these kind of discussions because we need to have them to clarify for the people also what's going on. And I'm glad that I can be a small part of this, but I mean, you have done most of the work, and I think you have done a great job to put on to show one of the maybe largest issues that are keeping the regime in power still. That the fact that we have thousands of companies still trading with them, despite the people's protests, despite the revolution going on against this government. And they have done that for many years without taking any, the human rights in consideration. So thank you for that. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Riasa. I want to personally thank you for everything you have been doing for many years for human rights, both in Sweden as a parliamentarian, but also issues concerning Iran. Thank you for your participation. I want to give the word to Mr. Arabi before Ambassador Wallace gives his remarks.
A positive note, I think there is no doubt whatsoever that the Islamic Republic will collapse. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And I truly admire the brave Iranian youth in particular that are resisting this regime every single day. The choice is simple. It should not be difficult for countries worldwide. You are either with them or you're with the side that is oppressing them. And not just oppressing them in Iran, it is targeting Iranians globally. It is the leading state sponsor of terrorism, and it's now conducting operations in European soil. But to go back to the key point here, this regime will collapse. And I think we need to do everything we can. Both I say this as an expert working on Iran, but also as an Iranian, and also as a Brit. We need to provide absolute maximum support to the Iranian people, because by providing that support, we can minimise the bloodshed and provide them with the means to overthrow this regime, which is the fall of this regime will be not only the single most liberating thing for the people of Iran, but the region and for peace and security worldwide.
Thank you, Mr. Rabi. I'm really honored to have you fighting on our side. Thank you for your expertise and your intelligent way to work. Ambassador Wallace, you are in my eye a hero, a consistent hero.
Stole my line.
I am really proud that you have done this for so many years. Why are you doing this? What is your hope for a new future in Iran?
I really seriously was. You asked what is our dream, you want to end on a positive note, because there really is a big positive note. First of all, thank you for doing this. Thank you for everything you do. Katra, thank you. Manelli, Mariam, Iran International, Voice of America. The reason why this is so great and why my dream is now is I'm sitting here with an incredible group of brave, heroic Iranians that are trying to take back their country, their people, from horrible dictator. That is a dream. I have been doing this a long time, but now the real heroes are all around me. And that's incredibly moving. It's the first sign of the end of the regime, truly, when the people, the great people around me, are standing up. What we need to do more is that more people that look like me need to stand with you all. in a consistent, thoughtful way. Think about the courage in this room. Iranian parliamentarians who face assassination threats standing up against the regime. Khazra, a recent party, if you will, from Iran, facing those threats. Iran International, my friends here that are broadcasting this, they had to leave the United Kingdom because the United Kingdom couldn't protect them from the threats of the regime. The brave voice of America broadcasters. This is being broadcast across diaspora channels around the world now, over Iran International. Inevitably, the diaspora will start fighting with each other about something. I would just ask, in addition to people standing with all of you brave Iranians, I think all of you brave Iranians should cut each other a little bit of slack. That's called the drop the mic moment, when you ask the Iranians to cut each other a little slack. Because you all want the same thing. I hear it from every type of person in the diaspora, every political belief. You want the regime to fall, and you want a free, hopeful, democratic Iran. We are all united and stand together for that. We are living that dream right now, and we should be proud of that. And I am so lucky that my professional and career dream is right now, and I get to sit here with all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Do we have any questions? Ms. Farah, we have a microphone.
First of all, thank you. And I have a question. I know the goal of what you are doing right now, but you mentioned that you want to talk about the solution. And I'm wondering to know that now you know which companies are trading with Iran and you know all the things that you want to know about them. But my question is how you want to convince them to stop trading with Iran, and because as we know, money talks, and they more think about their benefit more than people in Iran. I don't mean that they don't care about humanity, but my question is how you want to convince them. I know you don't have a specific solution right now because it's a long-term need, but yeah, this is what I want to know.
Thank you for your fantastic question. In this room, we have several lawmakers. Our job is to create new laws. Our job is to make sure that the existing laws are followed. And we are well connected. And we are going to make sure that the existing laws are followed. We are going to make sure that, if necessary, that we are giving new proposals for laws to make sure that these companies, even if they don't want to do it, that they have to do it. This is one method. The second method is to publicly shame the companies who doesn't want to take their part of the big responsibility. And in these kind of societies like Sweden, Western Europe, everyone spending a lot of money to brand their companies. They don't want to get touched with global terrorism. We give them carrots and we have leash. We are not here to joke around with anybody. This is a matter of Swedish security. I don't want to have a single Swedish company who are providing parts for the drones who are attacking Ukrainian civilians. I have been in Ukraine twice after the war. I have seen the destruction with my own eyes. We all know what this regime, Islamic Republic, is doing inside Iran. But we need to show what they are doing outside Iran also, to make sure that we have the public opinion, the lawmakers, the policy makers with us in the harsh journey. And we are not going to give up. How many threats, how many attacks they are launching at us, we are not afraid.
I would just add on one point. Is it good business to do business in Russia right now? I don't think so. No responsible company wants to tell its shareholders, its employees, its family, that they are doing business to promote Russia. I think it's bad business to do business in Iran. Let's be clear, these companies that we've identified or we're asking questions of, they're great companies. Incredible companies employing thousands of people, great families. I want them to succeed, and they have incredible business opportunities in markets around the world. The risk of doing business in Iran is in some ways greater than the risk of doing in Russia, because of the dangers of terrorism, because of the transnational oppression of the Iranians on foreign soil. So it's in the company's interests to not do business in Iran. And one of the most revealing reasons that is they don't want to own up to it. The moment a company has to come clean and tell you the nature and extent of its business in Iran is the moment it has to plan to end its Iran business. Because people don't want to do business with a company in Iran. And the markets around the world are much more vast than that Iranian market. Someday that market will be vast and will be open, and I will urge every one of those Swedish companies to go support the Iranian people. But right now, no.
Do we have any more questions?
Hi, and thank you for this great panel. With due respect, I remain seated because of the cameras. So, as a Iranian Swedish citizen, it's delightful to see that 5 companies have responded and said they withdraw. And it's heartwarming to see that they have acted in line with Swedish values. However, depending on the complexity of their business operation, from executive decision to actually stopping business with Iran, full stop, it might take quite a long time. And from obviously, sanctions have previously been introduced, and the reason we are sitting here is because sanctions have not been properly communicated, or people or companies have not been kept accountable to that. So how are we going to ensure that the companies that have withdrawn or said that they're going to withdraw, they're actually going to do it? And which authority is going to do that, and what are some of the concrete actions that we can put into place and ensure that the same mistakes don't happen again? Thank you.
Thank you for a great question. We didn't talk about the other part of this project. We have other parts of this project because this is equally important. We know that the sanction enforcement is not working as good as we wanted to work. We had discussion with OFAC in the US, I had discussion with the European Commission that we need to bring in new measurement to make sure that the existing sanctions are implemented as good as possible. But we also know that Iran, Islamic Republic and IRGC found new methods to go around the sanctions. We know we have the name of the banks that they are using. We know the name of many of these shell companies that they are using. And the other part is close the other door that they go around. So we do it in methodology to make sure that we are not ending up with empty hands. So this is a big campaign. This is the start of a huge campaign with several
as different parts. I normally describe it as a puzzle. Every puzzle has different pieces, and the different pieces together will give us the fantastic effect that we want. This is a big puzzle, but not the only one.
I think it's a very good question. A classic example, perhaps the best example, is Ericsson. The cellular phone networks inside of Iran are important to the Iranian people. We all love our cell phones, and Iranian people, including the Iranians in this room, love their cell phones too. But those cell phones are used as devices of tracking, apprehension, and ultimately torture and killing of people inside of Iran. There was a company called ZTE, which provided tracking mechanisms for use with the mobile phone networks inside of Iran. And these were used to truly track, hunt down, torture, and kill Iranian people. Ericsson committed to leaving Iran a long time ago. I wasn't expecting I should remember the date, but I get confused sometimes. They're still there. They're still winding down their business. But it's untenable for an Ericsson, which is a great, legitimate company, to be involved in an industry that has blood on its hands. Let me repeat that. It has blood on its hands. If you all were using your phones inside of Tehran to communicate, the authorities, with the help of certain companies such as ZTE, Chinese companies, and other cell phone providers, would use that to track you, to hunt you, to apprehend you and your friends and family, put you in prison, torture you, and kill you. Is that the right market for Ericsson to be in? I don't think so. Is that the right market for any Swedish company to be in? I don't think so. Absolutely not. This is it is about sanctions. Like, I've been involved in drafting and enforcing sanctions my entire career. But I would submit to you, this is about the conscience of businesses and people that run those businesses. The good people that run companies like that should not want to do business where their products are used to track, hunt, and kill Iranians.
Thank you, everyone. It has been a really interesting conversation, and I'm really grateful for everyone who has participated in this. This is just a starting point, and I want to send a message for the Iranian diaspora in my ending remarks. Freedom is worth fighting for. Freedom is worth making sacrifices for. This is, we have a saying in Farsi, ye dast se da nadare. And if we want to succeed, we need to help each other. We need to find the weak links. I compare this with a chain necklace. If you find the weak link and cut it, you cannot wear the necklace anymore. And our job is to find these weak links and cut it. And if we are helping each other, if we are doing this by the book, I'm quite sure that the expiry date of this murderous regime will come much sooner than anybody is expecting. Thank you, everyone, for your contribution to this. I'm really, really grateful. Wish you all